Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around, because it's Anything Can Happen Wednesday, I'm doing a little bit about an actor who's come up on the channel before, Donald Henry Pleasence, also known as Donald Pleasence. He was born in 1919, he died in 1995, and he had a very interesting life and a very interesting career as a jobbing actor. I'll do a bit of a background on him, and then I'm going to give you the 10 best roles on film that I think Donald Pleasence did during his career. So we'll start with his life. He was born in Nottinghamshire, and his father was a train station master. Pleasence himself worked on the train station at one time as a clerk selling tickets. But in 1939, he decided he wanted to be an actor and went to a repertory company on the island of Jersey. Now, the island of Jersey in 1939 was a very interesting place, and fortunately, Donald Pleasence got off Jersey before the Nazis invaded the island. In 1939, he was conscripted, but he refused conscription as a conscientious objector. But then in 1940, the Luftwaffe started bombing London, and Pleasence quickly changed his mind, rightly so, and in the Air Force he served as an aircraft wireless operator with number 116 Squadron in Bomber Command. Pleasence flew slightly short of 60 raids over occupied territory, dropping bombs on the Nazis. On the 31st of August 1944, the Lancaster bomber he was in was shot and crashed, and he parachuted out and was caught by the Germans. He was held prisoner in Stalag Luft 1 and was liberated at the end of the war. Now, I've looked up a little bit about what happened in Stalag Luft 1. It was quite a nasty place to be, as all prisoner of war camps inevitably are. Things got so bad on the food front at the end of the war that the prisoners there had to eat the local cats. They grabbed the cats and they ate them raw because there was no fuel, and so they had to eat raw cat to survive until the liberation. While he was in Stalag Luft 1, Donald Pleasence also put on a whole bunch of plays and productions and produced them to keep the prisoners amused while they waited for the end of the war. After the war, he went back to doing repertory theatre in Bristol and Birmingham. So, yeah, his skills eventually took him to London, where he did a number of plays. And he started doing some movie roles, and he did a lot of television as well. He'd turn up on things like The Adventures of Robin Hood and a number of other TV series while still building his career and earning a living. He was actually married 4 times, and each of his marriages ended less than a year before his next marriage. He was a guy who liked to be married. In fact, Pleasence started his television work as far back as 1946 in a thing called I Want to Be a Doctor. Pleasence actually started his film career in 1954 in a movie called The Beachcomber, and over the next 40 years he did a lot of work in film. These are the 10 that I like best. You may have a different 10 movies that Donald Pleasence appeared in that you like. That's okay, let me know what they are in the comments, but these are the 10 I like. Now, these 10 are in no particular order, but I think I put the best one at the top of the list just because it's the one I thought of first. So my favourite role by Donald Pleasence is in The Great Escape, John Sturgis's movie with an enormously talented and enormous cast. We play Colin Blood, the forger, for the people who are trying to escape from the prisoner of war camp.
Sorry I'm late, Roger.
All right, Colin, sit down. We're going to tunnel.
Splendid.
Having had real-life prisoner of war camp experience obviously informed Donald Pleasence's role in this one. But I watched his parts of the movie again this morning, and there's a real nuance and sensitivity to the character. He's kind of shy and diffident. He's a bird watcher, and he likes drawing sketches of them afterwards. Which is, his draftsmanship obviously is the reason why he's the forger for the group. And he builds a rapport with the scrounger of the group, played by James Garner.
Oh, hello. My name's Blythe.
Henley.
And there's a real bromance and kind of respect and mutual care between them, which has a sensitivity about it which is kind of interesting and deepens the role. Garner's an actor who could show a good range of emotion, and he plays off Donald Pleasence really well in this. They're very, very different men, and they just have a chemistry that works really well. Of course, Blythe the forger is losing his eyesight, but he still wants to escape with the group, and James Garner's character helps him. For me, that relationship is part of the heart of the film. It really works incredibly well, because of the skill of the two actors, the writing, and the fact that it's not British step upper lip upper class things like you have with the characters played by James Donald and Richard Attenborough. It's clear that both of these guys are not really macho guys, and James Garner's character gets him what he needs to do his job and looks after him as well. They're probably my favourite 1960s bromance, apart from Philby and George in The Time Machine. I think there's a real different kind of masculinity than you get with the Steve McQueen character in there, and with a lot of the other swinging dicks you have in the acting ensemble like Charles Bronson and people like that, and James Coburn as well. I really like the way that Donald Pleasence plays that character, and their fantastic lived experience gives it a kind of truthfulness that really works for me. So the next one I got's a bit of an obscurity, and it is a Roman Polanski film. I'm sorry about that. Don't like the guy, but I kind of like this film. It's a movie called Cul-De-Sac from 1966, where he plays a character called George, who is the cuckolded husband of a beautiful woman played by Francois Dorliac. I haven't seen this one in a while, but I remember really liking the way that Donald Pleasence played a character who knows he has punched above his weight in his marriage. His wife's much more beautiful than he is handsome, and much more charismatic than he is. And the vulnerability he shows is really interesting. I like actors who can play strong characters and can play characters who are more troubled. I think that kind of range is more in line with all of our experiences as human beings. Even the most butch of us isn't butch all the time. And in Cul-De-Sac, we get that. Also, I like that movie. I like the locations in that movie, the castle and the waterfronts and all that kind of thing. I really like the way that the locations were chosen in that. And of course, I have a thing for the sadly late Francois Dorliac as an actress, and I kind of like the persona and the way she carried herself too. Then he played a total nutcase in 1967's Will Penny, a guy called Preacher Quint, who is as mad as a cut snake.
Oh, that is bleeding real bad. Well, we don't want that to happen. I knew the fella once. His wagon team got away with him and run a wheel spoke right through his middle. Bled himself out, right there. But don't you know how easy it was?
And going from a character like George to a character like Quint is really interesting. There's these weird juxtapositions in the roles that Donald Pleasence played, where one movie he'd play a character totally outrageous and totally full on and totally large, and his next character will be one of those characters that you lean in on and you watch carefully because the acting is subtler. His range was truly impressive, and the juxtaposition between 1966 doing Cul-De-Sac, it might have been 65, but I think it's 66, and then playing a mad Western preacher in the elegiac movie Will Penny, that kind of range awes me. And you see it with other actors as well, even in modern times. You see it with people like Paul Giamatti, and you see it with Willem Dafoe and a number of other people. Those actors with the grounding in theatre really love covering the waterfront. They give us so many different characters in so many different ways, and I'm always delighted by that. I think when you get an actor that steps outside of the trap of stereotyping, really enriches the experience for the people who know their previous work, which is why people like Tom Cruise piss me off, because they play the same kind of character all the time. Then, of course, we've got one of my favourites from 1970, In Fright.
Do you mean you don't think the Yabba is the greatest little place on earth?
Could be worse.
How?
Supply of beer could run out.
Aren't you going to eat that?
No.
The Ted Kotcheff movie where he plays a guy called Doc Tyden, who gives sanctuary to the lost, bewildered and damaged school teacher played by Gary Bond. He has his own reasons for doing that, as we see as the movie progresses. He's got that dangerous thing of being an educated man and a predator as well. And he really sits in that ensemble as a booby trap for the main character, Gary Bond's school teacher. Now, I like Wake and Fright for a lot of reasons. I like the locations. I've been to the locations. And sometime in the next week or so, I'm going to be talking about another film that was filmed in those locations. Just seeing him in those first four roles that I've mentioned, and the range of characters he's playing, even though Yeah, he's got one of those faces that looks the same, regardless of who he is. Yeah, with the beaky nose and the bald head and the kind of round, slightly protuberant eyes. All of that stuff would think that he'd be the sort of character actor that is sit comfortably in one kind of role. But that's not the case. His roles are crazily and wonderfully diverse. Then we go to one I've mentioned recently on the channel, Innocent Bystanders, the Peter Collinson directed spy movie with Stanley Baker, where he plays Lewis, a spy master who runs John Craig, the character played by Stanley Baker. And there are these delightful scenes where he's talking to a CIA officer played by Dana Andrews, and he takes him to his really horrible London gentleman's club to talk to him. And he knows that the food and the wine at his club are atrocious, but in order to get the upper hand with his CIA guy, he orders the food and drink for him and orders the most atrocious food and drink possible in order to get the upper hand. And it's a beautifully, subtly humorous role.
All right, Loons.
Blake, good to see you. Can I get you something?
Could I have a dry martini?
I shouldn't think so.
And going from Doc Tyden to playing Looms in a year, I just like the way he does it and the way he undercuts every other character that he meets in the movie. The underlings he has and the spies that he runs, the CIA, anybody else he deals with. He has the upper hand by being calm and totally ruthless.
Vegetable, sir?
Yes, boiled potatoes, of course. Do you have any Brussels sprouts?
We do, sir, but...
A double portion. Mr. Blake will enjoy them. They don't serve them very much in America, you know.
And it's only at the end, of course, he has his comeuppance. But I like that character, and I like the way that Donald Pleasence plays it. Then we get to one of my favourites. I saw this in the cinemas when it came out, and I say that about a lot of movies, but then I have wasted a lot of my time looking at Electric Shadows. It's a movie called Deathline in some markets and Raw Meat in others. It's about some murders on the London Underground, and it turns out that the murderer is the descendant of some workers who were digging the subway tunnels in the 19th century and who were buried and cut off from everybody else, and who somehow survived and bred, and their descendants became inbred, but still human. And the sole survivor is basically kidnapping people and eating them as food. And yet that character keeps his humanity in a way that most horror movies don't show us. If you've got somebody who's an underground cannibal, they tend to be very unnuanced. But in Deathline, we don't get that. And then we get Inspector Calhoun, played by Donald Pleasence, with a tweed cap on, and he's got a cold, so he's always sniffing it and blowing his nose in his handkerchief and ordering his underlings around. He's a working class copper who's a head detective.
Yes, sir?
Tea!
Oh, sorry, sir. I had to get some more tea bags.
Tea bags? You've been using tea bags?
They're standard issue now. Do you still want some, sir?
Yes, of course I want some.
Very good, sir.
What's funny about it?
And again, it's another humorous role from Donald Pleasence, and it doesn't necessarily undercut the horror and the pathos of the monster that we have in the tunnels beneath London. It gives us a kind of breathing space from that, and his portrayal in this is a lot of fun to watch, and his dialogue is sharp and sardonic in a really, really good way. While we're staying in the 1970s, let's talk about Barry McKenzie Holds His Own, directed by Bruce Beresford, the guy who directed Driving Miss Daisy. It's the second one of the Barry McKenzie movies, written by Barry Humphries, portrayed by Barry Crocker, a gormless Australian travelling around London and then Europe, as his Aunt Edna, played by Barry Humphries, is kidnapped by Eric Count von Plasma, a Transylvanian vampire who thinks that she's the Queen of England.
There's really no need to sustain this elaborate subterfuge in front of me, Elizabeth.
There is a cross on the line! I told you never to use an ad!
Which word?
Line? No!
And this is Donald Pleasence playing really large. His vampire character is a lot of fun. He's got the widow's peak, he's got the fangs. He's kind of slurs his voice in a slurping kind of way. You know, that's exactly what kind of movie it is. And one of the great things is he's playing it tonally exactly right for this kind of broad satirical farce. His character sits comfortably in the middle of the established characters from the previous movie, The Adventures of Barry McKenzie. It's a lot of fun to watch him in this, and I kind of like the idea of him playing vampires. He played vampires in a couple of other films as well, but in this one he gets to play it large and silly and quite humorous. I mean, again, I'm just awed with the range of Donald Pleasence. Then I had to put this one in here, otherwise a lot of people would be mad with him. Dr. Loomis, the psychiatrist in Halloween, who has known Michael Myers since he was a child and has real conflicts in coming to terms with the existence of ultimate evil, is the one who explains the nature of Michael Myers and how he seems to be a soulless, utterly ruthless and emotionless being. And Donald Pleasence, in this and some of the sequels, the Loomis character turns up in the Reubens as well, not played by Donald Pleasence, but played in the manner of Donald Pleasence, Dr. Loomis. It's a jobbing role. It's his first collaboration with John Carpenter as well, and they made 2 more movies together. They made Escape from New York, of course, which again I've talked about before, and they also made Prince of Darkness, which I've got to rewatch. I think I want to review that one on the channel. But again, it's a very different character, and a character who bears the weight of his knowledge of the existence of this evil. And Donald Pleasence doesn't just cash a check with this. Second last one is a fairly small role from the early 1960s in Circus of Horrors, the circus horror movie starring Anton Diffring, where he plays a circus owner after World War II, a guy called Vale, who's a drunk and runs a very rundown circus. And his daughter has a disfigurement from being a victim of the war. And he sells his circus basically to the character played by Anton Diffring because he's a plastic surgeon on the run. He can fix Vale's daughter's face, even though he's playing a drunkard, which is a hard thing to do without overdoing it. But if you watch it carefully in Circus of Horrors, Donald Pleasence's tone is exactly right. Yes, he's playing somebody who's drunk and he's playing somebody with a French accent, but he does it in a way that isn't over the top. It's toned exactly right for the character. He's a man who loves his daughter and he loves the animals in his circus, including the bear, which ultimately kills him. And even though it's not particularly an overwritten role, he does give it a humanity which is really interesting. And it shows that even when he was doing a brief role for a few days in a low-budget horror movie, he still gave great value. And of course, that's why his career was so long and so diverse, because he was reliable and he had the skills. The last one's a bit of a rarity from the early 1960s called Dr. Crippen, where he plays the real-life murderer, Hawley Harvey Crippen. And this one's interesting because it's shot in a slightly documentary look. It also stars Samantha Eggar as his mistress. And it really is a solid piece of acting. This, from a technical acting point of view, may be one of his best roles. It's one of his few starring roles. And him as Crippen gives us a complicated man who claims he hasn't murdered his wife, but it's fairly obvious that he has. He gives us, that character, in spite of that, a humanity and a plausibility, which makes the character even more creepy. If you can find a copy of Dr. Crippen, I recommend that you find it. It's a hidden gem in the career of Donald Pleasence, and it's a nice place to end talking about the 10 favourite movies I have of Donald Pleasence's career. Before we go, I've got one more thing to do. I was really saddened by the death of Paul Reubens, also known as Pee Wee Herman, who had been enduring cancer. I don't say fighting, I think enduring, and trying to be treated for cancer for 6 years without public knowledge. And he died yesterday, I believe, at the age of 70. Now, I've liked Paul Reubens in a lot of things. I like Pee-wee's Playhouse. In fact, I've had this for over 30 years. And I cleaned it up and took it out of the box today just to kind of commemorate the life of Paul Reubens. Now, he wasn't somebody who had a very straight up and down career. That dodgy arrest in Florida where he was caught being kind to himself in an adult theatre really killed his career as Pee Wee Herman for a while. And there was also a raid on his house. He collected vintage pornography, and the claim was made that he had some child material. This proved to be wrong, and it was disproved later on. But again, it's one of those things that people found unsavoury in the 1990s when it occurred. But I always liked Paul Reubens, and the amount of love that he's getting from people who actually knew him leads me to suspect that it's misfortune more than anything that he had those two glitches in his career. I would like Pee Wee Herman. I like the playfulness and the sardonic nature of the character. And I will always treasure my Pee Wee Herman doll. Unfortunately, the string at the back that makes him speak is broken and has been for a very long time. This is one of my treasures in a way. And I keep it to honour Paul Reubens, and I liked his work as a character actor as well. If you look deep into his IMDb, you're going to find some interesting roles there. Vale, Paul Reubens. So that's it for this story. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, hit the notification bell. Let me know what your favourite Donald Pleasence roles are. There are a lot of them to choose from. You can also support the channel by donating at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. And if you want to become a channel member, channel memberships are now available, and you can donate $6.99 Australian per month towards the channel if you'd like to do things that way. There are some extras that the channel members and the Patreon supporters get. I've got a Spotify playlist now where each month I put up a new movie-related musical playlist from Spotify so that people can enjoy that playlist who are both Patreon supporters and or channel members. And it's a lot of fun putting together those playlists. I think I'm about 5 months ahead already. So anyway, until next time, look after yourselves, be safe, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies, watch the career of Donald Pleasence and realise he was never bad in any movie. And I'll catch you next time.